So we've always been using technology to do a better job for the client, and we're going to do the same thing in tokenization. So tokenization, blockchain is real. It's been around for quite a while, but now it's becoming more effective, more efficient, because people are finding ways to do it faster and cheaper, permissioned or not permissioned.
One of the oldest and arguably most powerful banks in the world, with $57 trillion of assets under custody, just announced that they are offering tokenized deposits for its institutional investors. Tokenization, that sounds familiar. Remember when Larry Fink said that everything will be tokenized?
What do you mean by digital?
I do believe we're just at the beginning of the tokenization of all assets, from real estate to equities to bonds.
Or when he said that people aren't paying enough attention to tokenization and the impact that it's going to have on society?
We're not spending enough time talking about how quickly we're going to tokenize every financial asset and the opportunity we're going to have a digital wallet and moving ETFs and other things through a digital wallet. And I think that's going to happen worldwide very rapidly. And I think most countries are ill-prepared for that and underappreciate how technology is changing that.
Well, this announcement surely marks a huge step in the direction towards institutions taking this very seriously. And I personally think that there's an incredible opportunity that is hiding right under people's noses regarding this announcement and what it means. So let's break down exactly why this is so important and why this actually marks the definition of money changing in real time and what this means for you and your money. So the largest custodial bank in the world, BNY Mellon, just announced that they will be offering tokenized deposits to institutional clients to speed up settlement and unlock liquidity. Well, what is a custodial bank? What is tokenization and what exactly is going on here? To begin, I know that we keep on hearing about stable coins and digital money, and a lot of us are confused because everything is pretty much already digital, right? When you go to the grocery store, you use your debit card. When you send money to your friends and family, you use Zelle or Cash App. And right now, I've seen estimates of around 90% of all currency all over the world is digital. And it's not just currency, right? We also have securities like stocks and bonds that mostly exist as electronic records in databases. There's no more paper certificates that move around and change hands when you buy or sell stocks or bonds like there were in the past. So to fully grasp how the definition of money itself is changing right now, we have to differentiate between digital money and tokenized money. And to do that, we need to understand a couple of concepts. The first thing that I want to talk about is how the value of the US dollar today is backed by nothing other than the full faith and credit of the United States. When President Nixon took the US and essentially the world off of the gold standard in the 1970s, dollar bills no longer represented claims on gold. And that right there really redefined what money was. Because now money, and really what people say you must call currency, okay, it's currency, it's not money anymore. It no longer represented a claim on anything physical, but instead, the US dollar only represented an arbitrary value that's prescribed to it by society. And this is what is called a fiat currency. And by the way, the word fiat in Latin literally means let it be done. Okay, so this is money that has value because a government entity says it does. Now, before this, you could say that money was being used as a token to represent ownership in gold. You could trade that paper currency for gold. The same way that you can trade a token or some tickets at an arcade for prizes. So now we kind of have a grasp on the concept of a token, right? A token is something that represents something else in a different form, right? When you go to a casino and you get chips, those chips are essentially tokens in the world outside of the casino. Now, the second thing I want to break down is this. Before fiat money, people would deposit their gold at a bank, and you would get paper receipts that represent that return. And so you've given up possession of real money, which is the gold, and you've actually taken a claim on that money in the form of a paper receipt, currency. Now, if someone were to rob that bank of the gold, then your paper receipt wouldn't really be worth much of anything, because the gold that the receipt is meant to represent is no longer. Now, when you deposited your gold at that bank, you've given up the possession of the value of that gold. So even though you own the piece of paper that represents a claim on that gold, you're taking on the risk that that bank may not be able to fulfill on the promise to give you that gold and the value that that gold represents back to you at a later date. Now, when money goes digital, that concept of custody can get abstracted away. For instance, when you have a dollar bill in your hand, right, it's very clear that you own that money, you own the right to use that money, and you also have the value of that money in your hand. But when things go digital, you don't really have possession of money anymore. You put, for instance, your $100 bill and you put it in an ATM, and then that's in the bank's hands, right? It doesn't take digital money for this to be the case, but you now don't even think about it in that way. And the reason we had to break down fiat currency as well is because it's super hyper abstracted away when money isn't backed by anything. So when money is existing in this digital form, it's really hard to grasp the fact that it's not your money. You have a claim to that currency, that paper currency, right? But it actually isn't backed by anything, and it's actually in the possession of the bank. Most money is digital, and so most in circulation actually doesn't even exist anywhere at all. And let's say you get paid by direct deposit from your employer, right? So the employer just deposits money into your account, and when that happens, you never see that money, and in fact, that money's never yours. It's always the bank's money, and they just owe it to you on paper. But if that bank goes bankrupt, that money is gone. Now, obviously, in the United States, we have the FDIC, who insures up to $250,000 per person. But without that insurance, or to any amount of money above that $250,000 that's in a bank account, that money is gone in the case that that bank goes bankrupt. Okay, let's move forward. Beyond your assets in the form of currency, you also have stocks and bonds. And the evolution of stocks and bonds have actually gone through a very similar process. Okay, so historically, investors would receive paper certificates that represented direct ownership in a company. And over time, those certificates were held by brokers on behalf of investors. And that made the broker responsible for both trading that was happening of those assets and the safekeeping of these stock certificates. Now, as markets scaled, relying on an individual broker to safeguard ownership records became inefficient and honestly risky, right? People can make mistakes. And this led to the rise of a specialized entity called a custodian. And this is an institution like BNY Mellon, whose entire job is to actually hold securities and maintain accurate ownership records. Now, to further reduce the risk, that system evolved even further with the creation of a centralized securities depository, most notably the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, or the DTCC, who we just found out a couple weeks ago has been cleared to tokenize securities starting in Q3 of 2026. So what we have right now happening simultaneously is the tokenization of deposits at a bank, the tokenization of cash, and the tokenization of securities as well. Now, what this means is that we're taking the digital money that exists in our bank accounts that all exist digitally, and we're actually representing that money on this device or this technology called a blockchain. Okay, and these blockchains are separate databases. They're separate systems where these assets now exist. And on these blockchain systems, they are distributed. Okay, so that means that essentially there are several different computers that are maintaining the records of these databases. And what this can enable is that you have a much more seamless ability to transact across a network without there being another counterparty involved. So instead of there having to be someone on the other side of a trade when it gets settled and cleared by a large institution like BNY Mellon, the only actual counterparty is the code itself, because the code can programmatically settle transactions based upon set conditions that were put before. Traditional